Welcome to Easy Peasy Books, From Author to Authority, the lively and engaging podcast for business professionals who've always believed they have a book in them. I'm your host, Gillian Whitney. Join me as I chat with authors and industry experts from all around the world to explore simple strategies to write, publish, and leverage your business book. Whether you're an entrepreneur, executive, or an employee, this podcast is for you. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Easy Peasy Books podcast. And today is a solo episode, and what I wanted to talk about is podcast guesting, because I think this is one of the most underutilized marketing strategies that you can use to promote your book. And the nice thing is this is a free way. You don't have to take out ads. You don't have to do anything fancy. Podcast guesting is free. If you run into somebody who's going to charge you, I suggest you run the other way, because there's just way too many people that are looking for good quality guests. And you should be there showing up and raising your hand and saying you want to be a guest on someone's show. So I'm going to walk you through today, not everything you need to know. I'm going to start off with basically how to set yourself up as a guest, how to get on a show in the first place. In other episodes, I'll go into what to do once you're a guest, and, how to leverage it afterwards and all those other things. But that would be too much for one episode. So I'm just going to start today with how to get those guest appearances in the first place. I'm going to talk from my own personal experience. And the thing that I think is unique about me, doing this topic today, is I have been on both sides of the mic. I have been on dozens and dozens of podcasts as a guest, and I'm on my second podcast here. So between my first one, which was the first one was called LinkedIn Easy Peasy, and this one, Easy Peasy Books podcast, I've done almost 250 shows as a host, let alone the dozens of guest appearances I've had. So I know what it's like to be in your shoes, wanting to be a guest, but I also know what it's like to be the host and what I've seen people do wrong. So I'm hoping that if I speak from my heart today, I can give you some advice that you'll go, oh, I needed to hear this, and now I know what I've not been doing right in the first place. Or maybe you kind of went, ooh, this is something that's kind of scary for me. I'm hoping to give you that confidence. So first of all, why do we want to do this? Okay, the nice thing about podcasts is that podcasts are usually evergreen, which means that if you did a podcast several years ago, it's probably still living out there on the interweb somewhere. It doesn't expire. Whereas a social media post, it's like we posted, it's one and done. And, kind of people go, I never saw that again. It just seems to disappear. So podcasts are sort of that foundational, evergreen content that stays out there and may be good for you for another book down the road. So I really say, podcast can help promote your book today, but it can also be used to do some great stuff tomorrow. So you want to keep track of all those podcasts. So the other thing is that podcasts are, essentially, if you've written a book, so I'll just grab one of my books right here. Here we go. Here's one I wrote, Stand Out in Your Job Search with Video. If you have written a book, then that book is like your ticket. It's like Willy Wonka. It's your golden ticket that you can now leverage and say, hey, I have some expertise that is, and I've thought it all through enough to put it all into a book format. And that is an advantage. So kind of think of your book as that golden ticket that will help get you on more shows. So if you've got a book, it helps promote the book, but it's also sort of like the key that opens the door to get you into the podcast in the first place. So just wanted you to kind of think about that. So let me just start off with number one. Why is podcast guesting a must? So the short answer is because you are leveraging the host's audience. Essentially what you're doing is you're borrowing their audience for a short amount of time. So being a guest on a podcast it allows you actually to get in front of people who don't know you yet. So that's like a whole new, it's like a whole new audience for you, which is really, really exciting. But the important thing is that they're already, the listeners of that podcast, they already have a rapport with your host. So they already feel comfortable with that host. That's why they tune in each week. And that host has already built the know and the like and the trust. And so when you go on their show, it's essentially like they're transferring that feeling to the guest. So people are like, oh, she or he has already been vetted by the host. Otherwise, why would the host even have them come on the show? And so they kind of relax and they're ready and more receptive to listening to you. Whereas if you're starting your own podcast from scratch, you could be, belting out episodes and nobody knows who you are yet. You're not a proven thing. So you have to attract that audience. Well, now with podcast guesting, you are going to a known audience that's already existing with a wonderful host that's going to be vouching for you, or else they wouldn't have you on your show. So that, I think, is really important. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to point number two. And that is, you want to basically start with relationship building to get your podcast spots as opposed to cold pitching. Now, I know there's lots of tools out there, Podmatch, and I don't even know the formal name because I don't use any of them. But I'm going to tell you that if you are a small business owner, consultant, a coach, whatever, you might want to just start small and move up, as opposed to trying to be on the fanciest podcast. We're all not going to get on, we're not going to get on Oprah. It's going to take a lot before we get on Oprah. So we have to kind of work up to it, so whatever your goal is, you probably out of the gate can't go to those top, huge experiences, those huge shows. Have to, I'm not going to get on Marie Forleo. Yeah, maybe one day, but not right now. So the thing is, we have to kind of do it in baby steps. So I like to start with relationship building, and I've done cold pitches, but it's much easier if you go through a warm market. And what I mean by that is having somebody who will basically do the introductions for you. So my very, very first podcast was with Peter Sumpton, and it was the Marketing Study Lab. And that was back in, I believe, February 2020. I think it was just before COVID hit, actually. And I got that. That was my very, very, very first podcast interview. And how I got on that show was I was a friend, a colleague of John Asperian. And John Asperian knew me. He knew my content. He knew that I was a lead with value. And so he felt really comfortable kind of vouching for me and letting Peter know, hey, Gillian has a lot to offer. Back then, I was all into video. And so that was the expertise I was coming on. So John, number one, knew I had the expertise to do it. And number two, I was a known. He knew me personally. And number three, my content was out there. I already had video on LinkedIn and I had video on YouTube. So I had proven myself. I just didn't have an actual guest appearance yet. And so that's what I mean by a warm market. And to be honest with you, I've only pitched once in my entire career to be on a show. I'll tell you about that in a second. Every other show, every other guest appearance was either a referral. Somebody, sent me a DM and then they said, hey, I heard from so-and-so. They were on my show. They referred me to you. They said you'd be a great guest, blah, 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 blah. And I got the thing. Or it was just literally just somebody who I'm already, I already talk with, I knew, and they were like, you should come on my show. And it was like just that easy. It was just that easy. So I've never had to use any of those services. So that's just sort of my take. So here was my cold pitch. So that was my warm pitch. It wasn't even a pitch. It was like my warm introduction through John Asperian to my very, very first podcast appearance. And it was great. It went so well. Peter was a fabulous host. I got to cut my teeth, on podcasting with one of the most nicest, wonderful people. Peter was so amazing with how he interviewed me and asked me questions. And I was just so nervous. I thought I had to show up with statistics and I couldn't remember anything. And Peter was just like, so good. He was just so good. So it's nice to have a host who knows you're nervous and will help you. So now I'll go to the pitch, the cold pitch that I did. So one day I was listening, and I don't want to embarrass anybody, so I'm not going to name any names, but I was listening to a marketing podcast, and I really, really enjoyed this woman's show. I listened to it all the time. I was always out and walking. And one time she said at the end of the show, we're always looking for guests. And so if you'd be interested in being a guest on our podcast, go ahead and, send me an email. So I thought, oh, okay, you got to kind of move outside your comfort zone and this and that. So I sent an email and I got a sort of one of those, thanks. We got lots of responses. If we're interested, we'll be in touch. Well, they were never in touch. So obviously I didn't make the cut. But now in retrospect, I wrote a very nice email. I did everything right in terms of pitching myself, and I'll talk about, what you should do in a minute. But I did it right in terms of, how to reach out. I was familiar with the show. I knew what I could add to the show. But back then, I had a really small network. Maybe I only had about 1,000 followers on LinkedIn, something like that. I was just sort of getting started with LinkedIn. And the thing is that this was a big show. This was like a Marie Forleo show in terms of, the clout that being a guest on this show had. And now in retrospect, I just didn't have the platform to support it. I wasn't known enough. I wasn't established enough. So, in hindsight, that kind of probably stopped me from ever pitching again. And one day, maybe I'll stop getting referrals and I'll have to start pitching again. But now I know that you have to really kind of say, I'm a good fit. And to be honest with you, I don't think I was a good fit. I was too new to podcasting. So podcast guesting. And I hadn't even done my own show yet. So I was learning. And that's cool. That's cool. So the next thing is how to find that right fit. Because it's kind of like shoes. You put shoes on and it's like the shoes look nice and this and that. Then you put them on and then you got to walk around in them, right? You can't just like take a pair of shoes and say, oh, they look good. You've got to walk around and see if they're a good fit. Not just that they fit, that they're a good fit. And I think this is really, really important that you start with your book. You want to think about your ideal reader. Who is that person that's writing, that you wrote that book to? Because I always say, if you write to everyone, you're actually writing to no one. And the same thing is with podcasts. You want to find the shows that are a right fit in terms of, if you want to get people interested in your book, you want to have your podcast. You want to choose a podcast that has your ideal reader in the audience, because at the end of the day, otherwise you're just wasting your time. Why do that? So it needs to be your ideal reader, the ideal person that you want to work with in your business, those type of things. So that get really, really clear. And then once you kind of think about, okay, who is my ideal reader? So then if I take that in the perspective of podcasting, what podcasts are my ideal reader listening to? So for instance, with me, if I was looking for this book, which was about how to feel comfortable on camera, well, a lot of times introverts don't feel comfortable on camera. And so I might be looking for podcasts that are going to attract introverts, so those are just like a simple way. If I wrote a book that was about, helping women who have kids and they want to do something, well, then I'm going to find a podcast that moms listen to. So it just makes sense, make that connection between where is my ideal reader listening and then figure out what those podcasts are. So I think that's really important. And the other thing too is um, search, you search for ones and you want to make sure that you find them by either looking on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, but there's also a really nice tool I like to use. And I got to look it up. It is Listen Notes. Listen, I have no notes here, so I don't have a teleprompter, so I have to just kind of remember things. And I have a couple of things just jotted down so I stay on track. But Listen Notes is a fabulous tool, and what you can do is you can go in and you can type in the search. It doesn't cost anything. I think you have to, if you do a lot, they might ask you to sign in, so you just come back another day or whatever. And you can't really download anything. I think you have to have a premium account for that. But to just do sort of basic Google searching, you can go to Listen Notes and then you can type in your topic. So for instance, if I wrote a book about how to help people write business books. So I could type in business books as my topic. And then it would show me podcasts where they had an episode that was similar. So I could look through it and say, oh my gosh, this is so similar to what I would want to talk about, but I would have this angle or that angle or something different. So that's what you want to do is you want to go and find those shows. And then you want to follow that up by now doing the homework and listening to them, because there's nothing in the world worse for a podcast host when you haven't figured out you really like my show. Yeah. So, and here's a ninja tip. If you listen to a show and you like it and you think, I'd like to be a guest on this podcast, the ninja tip is go and write a review. Write a review for that podcast so that you get on their radar. That way they know, number one, you actually are a listener and you are kind enough that you took the time to write a review, because then that means you're going to come as a value add. You're going to show up on that podcast, and afterwards, you're probably going to help promote the episode. You're going to send it out. You're not going to be one of these, sometimes people kind of get lazy. They'll come on your show and then they're like the queen. They just wave and they leave and they never help you. They never send it out to their network. It's just kind of one and done. And you're just like, well, that's weird, because this could be a win-win for both of us, if you promote the show. So when you do that review in advance, people really know that you did your homework and you were kind enough to leave a review. So I think that's really important to do that. So those are some of the things I use. So moving on to item number 4, before you pitch, this is what you want to do. And this is where I'm going to go put my podcast host hat back on, because there are certain things that I go, I know that these people, they did not do this right. They did not do their homework. So the first one is people that show up and have absolutely no idea what my podcast is about. It's just you're just what did you just see my name, podcast host? You didn't even see the name of my show. Come on, it's the Easy Peasy Books podcast. It has something to do with books. And I've had realtors, I've had accountants, I've had people that had nothing. Maybe the accountant thought it was bookkeeping. I don't know, keeping the Easy Peasy Books, it's bookkeeping or something. I don't know. But it's obvious that they did not do their homework, because they show up and you're just like, no, you have nothing related to my show at all. It was like my audience would just say, what did Gillian just, her brain explode? Why is this person a guest on the podcast? So no. Do your homework first and make sure that the content is appropriate. And then the second thing is, do your homework and go and watch the show or listen to the show and know, is it audio only? Is it audio plus video? Is it a live that gets repurposed into a podcast? And that was, for me, the biggest thing when I was doing the LinkedIn Easy Peasy podcast. I would have people that would say, I want to be a guest on your podcast, blah, 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 blah. And they'd go into their whole spiel. And then I would always tell them, but I do a live first. Are you okay with that? And they were like, oh my gosh, no. I don't want to do a live. I would never want to do a live. And it's like, okay, well, you've wasted my time and your time. So kind of know the format, know if it's like, is it a 10-minute thing? Is it a 30-minute show? Is it like, sort of a Joe Rogan 3-hour podcast? Like, know those things before you apply, because otherwise it's kind of sloppy. And even know that it's an appropriate show to have a guest. Like, for instance, John Asperian, I'll go ahead and talk about John Asperian again. He inherited the LinkedIn Formed, it's called the Informed podcast. Sorry, it used to be LinkedIn Informed, but now it's called the Informed podcast. So he inherited this from Mark Williams, and he is now the host of the show. By the way, he's doing a fabulous job. And with John, he does not ever have guests. He, I think occasionally he might, if it has something to do, but it's not a traditional, oh yeah, every week we have a guest. I kind of go on and off. It's like I have more me and a guest and then some solo with me, but John is pretty much all solo. So for somebody to go and just pitch, that they wanted to be a guest on his show, he'd be like, well, obviously you're not listening to my show, because I always talk about the mailbag, the post bag, all these kind of things. And you obviously know nothing about this. So you don't really know how my show works. So really knowing those things is so, so important. And then also too, you want to think about, well, what are some topics? Like what are the topics? Because I'll give you a clue. People aren't going to just say, sure, come on my podcast and pitch your book. We're not going to spend 30 minutes just talking about nothing but your book. There has to be something for the audience. So you have to think in terms of like the lessons learned. What did I learn along the way? So on a recent podcast, I had the wonderful Sherry Berry come on the show, and we talked about her book, It's Your Turn. But the angle we took was talking about her recording the audio book. And that was so valuable. People loved this episode because we got to be in Sherry's shoes. We got to see what was involved with actually taking a book and turning it into an audio asset. What was her journey? How did she do that? What were the questions? How did she vet people? Such an informative episode. And if you didn't listen to it, go listen to it after this one's done. So I think that's really important. And then the last thing is have proof, proof of life, proof that you can do it, because I want to make sure as a host that if I say yes, you're not going to come on my show and like I ask you a question and you just go, yes, no. Like I want it to be a conversation. So I want to know that you're comfortable answering questions. Are you comfortable? Like, you don't get to come with a script. So you have to be able to have their talking points and know when to stop talking and when to start talking. These things are all important. And so if you don't have any guest appearances, and if you do, give the podcast host some links that they can go and look. I think John Asperian, he once wrote an article about podcasting, and I think he even talked about making a podcast like speaker reel, so to speak. So you could take some snippets of your podcast appearances and put them all together in a little podcast reels, a highlight reel. So that would actually be kind of good. And I've done that for live streaming, where I've done like a highlight reel, and that's also a really good idea. So having that proof that you can be on a show, you do know what you're talking about, you're comfortable in this kind of environment is good. And if you don't have those yet because you're starting out, do what I did. It's like I just showed Peter, here's a couple of videos I did on LinkedIn, and here's my YouTube page where he could see all of my videos, and I gave him the links, but I made it easy for him. And that's what's really important. You just really want to make it easy for people. Then the last thing is you also want to have a media kit. Now, it doesn't have to be fancy. It could just be a Google Doc. It could be a Word document. But basically, you want to say, you want a one-liner of like who you are, what you do, who you serve, all those basic things, so that people can quickly get an idea of, who's your audience? Who do you work with? How do you help them? And that's important to have. And a lot of shows, I don't do this, but a lot of shows will actually make you fill out a Google a Google Doc, and they'll ask you questions. So having all these things in a one pager or a media kit just saves your time. So another thing you'll want in that, one pager is a bio. You want to have a bio that maybe is a longer one that they could use for, putting together their show notes and all that sort of thing. So a bio is good, but also make a short bio and a long bio. And the short bio would be so that they could just like introduce you. I make my guests work. I make my guests work. They have to introduce themselves. But some podcast hosts, they like to kind of read it and be able to, just announce who you are. So go ahead and have that short bio and make it so, you want to put this in the third person so that the host is not saying me. You want them to say, Gillian Whitney is, a business book coach and author visibility strategist and blah, blah, blah. You just want to have it that they can quickly just read it through. So that's important to have. And then, like I said, if there is some sort of application to be on their show, you can just copy it, copy, and paste it. And then think of some sample questions or sample topics, have those in your one pager as well. You also want to have a photo. I recommend you have a photo that's similar to your other social channels so that people, if you use your LinkedIn profile photo, that's what I use for everybody on my podcast. That way people immediately get to LinkedIn and they can find these people. So that's one thing. But you want it to be good quality, not blurry. It should be, good resolution and all that good stuff. So that's what you want to have. And then the last but not least, a list of contacts. So, your email address, your website, you want to have, the different social channels. What's your YouTube channel? What's your LinkedIn URL? Maybe you're on Instagram, Substack, all these other places, have all that together in that one pager. So it's kind of your master list that you will use over and over again. Okay. So moving on to point number 5, what to not do when you're on a podcast. And what you don't want to do is, number 1, pitch without listening to the show. So I talked about that earlier before with all those accountants and realtors and stuff who continue to, come to me. Too much information. Don't send me all that stuff before I even have decided I want you on my show or not. So don't be sending me, reams and PDFs and stuff because I don't want to work that hard. So, ask for permission, but it really should be once I've decided I want you on my show, I'll tell you what I need. So don't send me unsolicited information. And this is the most important thing. Don't go dark. I have that all the time where it's like people say they want to be on my show. And I say, okay, great. We decide they're a good fit and whatever. I send them the self-scheduling booking link and then they never book. They just disappear and I don't know what happens. So it's like, it always feels a little awkward. So it's like, either say, you know what? Life got nuts for me right now. I can't do this. Can I circle back with you in a couple months or something like that? But just nobody likes to be ghosted. So that's just sort of one last thing. So the last thing that I want to just sort of say in closing is I want to give you homework. I want to give you homework that I think what would really be good for you as an author is to follow up on everything I said today and go and find 5 different podcasts that you feel would be a good fit. And then begin to see, who do I know that maybe has been on the show? That's gold. You go through and you see, oh my gosh, so-and-so, I know them. I could ask them, ask for a referral. So go do that and go through and figure out which ones are a good fit and begin to think about how would I approach them. I like to approach people in, LinkedIn, sending a DM is so much easier than getting an email because sometimes we get in email mode and I get an email and I'm like, pitch. And then I'm just like, click, I'm deleting. But if you send me a LinkedIn DM, I'm much more likely to consider you for my show. So that's how I like to work. So if you see somebody and you like their show, follow them on LinkedIn and then connect with them. Tell them, I've been listening to your podcast. I really enjoy it. It's like if they are posting about their show, be the one in the comments. Be the one in the comments that's just saying, I love this show. This was an awesome episode. Because you know what? Podcast hosts see that. And that's usually how I find people for my show. It's just like, oh my gosh, she's always there in the comments supporting everybody else. I had somebody the other day who approached me and told me, and we're connected now on LinkedIn, and we've never actually met. We've never even had a virtual coffee or anything. And the other day she sent me a note about, I wanted to just, let you know about this other woman. I thought she'd be a good fit for your show. And she sent me a post, and she had a new book coming out and this and that. And I looked, and then I said, yeah, she would be good. But you know what? You'd be better. I know you. Why? You need to be on my show. So anyway, she's going to come on my show. So it's kind of fun. So get on their radar by following them, connecting with them when it's the right time, and being supportive of their show, because you will get noticed, and you might find you don't even have to pitch. Somebody will come and invite you in. So that's what I suggest for you. I will do some follow-up episodes on podcast guesting, and we'll kind of go on to the next steps later on in the next couple of weeks or so. But I hope you enjoyed this. It's a wonderful way to promote your book, like I said, for free. And I'm telling you, if people try to charge you, run, don't walk, because nobody should have to pay for this. It's a wonderful thing. Podcasting is a win-win for the host and the guest when you're aligned and it all works together. Okay, so that's it for me today on this solo episode of the Easy Peasy Books podcast. And we'll see you all, or hear you all, or hear me next, whatever, here next time. Okay, bye everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Easy Peasy Books, from author to authority. If you found value in today's episode, I'd be grateful if you could leave us a review. It helps other aspiring authors discover our podcast. To learn more about writing, publishing, and leveraging your business book, visit my website at easypeasybooks.com.